Sonic, the heart of your system.
Hello, Branny here from Kit Guru, and this is my review of the Gigabyte Aorus M5 mouse. Around this time last year, I reviewed the Aorus M3 mouse, which is a slightly more budget version. So the M5 is like a beefed up version of that mouse. It does have a few more features. It also has an improved sensor, but it is also available at a pretty reasonable price of around £50 here in the UK. Taking a look at the overall design of this mouse, I do think it is quite tasteful. It does fit in with like the overall Aorus aesthetic. So it has a matte black body, it's obviously like a plastic finish, and it has a lot of aggressive angular designs that make it quite an interesting looking mouse that does fit in with the Aorus lineup. So it matches their laptops and other peripherals and things. The front of the mouse has these sort of interesting fins that sort of stick out the front there, and then across the top of the mouse you have got this sort of quite interesting V shape. So it's quite a good looking mouse to look at, and I do like the sort of aluminium centerpiece they've got here with the scroll wheel and the DPI buttons mounted on. On the bottom towards the back of the mouse you have got the Aorus branding, so their logo is the eagle logo. I do like this logo, and it is RGB as well, so I do definitely like that. All the RGB on this mouse is actually really quite bright as well. I was quite impressed, even in sort of full daylight it does show up really well, which often isn't the case with RGB components. I really like these sort of wave stripes that go down either side of the mouse, and I think they do look very good in the rainbow wave effect that I've got going on. All of the different RGB zones on this mouse as well can be controlled using the Aorus Fusion 2 software, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later on. When it comes to the size and the shape of the body of the mouse, I must say it is probably going to suit most people. It's a medium-sized mouse, so I think that's going to tick plenty of boxes. If you've got smaller hands, if you've got larger hands, it does sort of fit that wide range of people. I fit in the smaller hands category, and I didn't really have any problems with this mouse. Of course, it is a right-handed mouse though, so if you're left-handed, it's certainly not going to suit you. The overall sort of shape of the mouse, it does slope off slightly to the right. I do quite like that, as for me it does feel quite supportive. It is a very ergonomic shape. Some people prefer a more symmetrical mouse, but I personally like my mouse to be a little bit more shaped to my hand. The left and right buttons sort of follow in with this overall sort of shaped and molded design. They are separate from the body of the mouse, and they do have a slight indent in them, so I found that quite nice for gripping onto the mouse. It stops your fingers sort of sliding around, and they do fit quite nicely into the grooves. On both sides of the mouse you'll find that it does have a little rubbered and textured grip. So they are made of like a soft rubber, and the texture does help provide a little bit more sort of grip as well. So you're not sliding around, and you can grip onto the mouse quite nicely if you're someone that likes to pick it up and things. I did however notice that the grips themselves are quite narrow, so the space for your thumb is pretty good size for me. But this outer grip where my pinky rests, I didn't have any issues, but I do have smaller hands, so it is definitely something worth noting that it is a little bit on the slim side. Also with this mouse I did try it using different grip styles. I want to make sure that the shape was going to be suitable for pretty much everyone, and I did try it palm grip, fingertip grip, claw grip, and for me I did find it to be quite comfortable and also very easy to adjust to. So I think it's going to suit, once again, most people when it comes to size and different grip styles. The left hand side of the mouse features two buttons that by default will control web page navigation, so they can go forwards and backwards while you're browsing the internet, but using the software you can of course rebind them to do different tasks and macros and things also. The buttons themselves are sort of a smooth plastic material. I find them easy to reach and get to when you do want to use them, but they're also raised enough off the body as well that I found that my thumb sort of avoided accidentally pressing them also. In the centre of the mouse is where you will find the rubber textured scroll wheel. It does have a little bit of extra RGB going on as well, and in general I did find it a nice scroll wheel to use. It glides really nicely and also has well-defined tactile bumps as well. Beneath the scroll wheel is where you will find two buttons to adjust the DPI of the mouse. So there is a plus button and a minus button, and you can switch between 4 pre-programmed profiles. You can also change the DPI of those using the software, but by default it's 800, 1200, 1800 1300 and 2400 DPI to switch between. On the left hand side of the mouse you also have a little LED indicator that tells you which profile is selected, so there is a little white LED. Unfortunately though, compared to the RGB lighting on this mouse, which is really quite bright, those LEDs barely really show up. They only really show up if you're in quite a dimly lit room, and it is quite hard to see which profile is selected. When it comes to the cable for the mouse, it's basically what you want in a cable for a wired mouse. It's sort of quite soft and lightweight and flexible. It's sort of coated in what feels like quite a hard wearing soft matte rubbery material. It's not kind of the sticky rubber you get on some cables. It does feel slightly more hard wearing than that. I do personally prefer braided cables, and I do think this cable could be slightly more flexible. However, it is a good length at 1.8 meters, and a smooth cable does make a lot of sense for a mouse. Taking a look at the underside of the mouse, you can see that the Pixart 3389 sensor is situated in the middle, slightly more towards the front of the mouse, and this is an excellent sensor that I'll talk a little bit about the performance slightly later on. Also, you will see the 4 Teflon feet that this mouse has. The 2 towards the back are slightly larger, and you also get a spare set of Teflon feet in the box as well, which is a nice little addition that should ensure that the feet aren't going to wear out over the lifespan of the mouse. The main feature on the underside of the mouse is going to be the weight adjustment system that this mouse comes with. So by default it is actually a heavier mouse anyway, so it weighs in at 118 grams. I do personally prefer a slightly heavier mouse, however I do know some people like their mouse to be as light as possible. The cover for the compartment for the weights is pretty easy to remove. I think it's held on with a single magnet, so it comes off easily when you need it to. There's no screws or anything involved with that. Inside the mouse you can add 5 weights that are included with the mouse, and they can bring the overall total weight up to 130.5 grams in 2.5 gram increments. So overall that does make it a pretty hefty mouse if you put all of those weights in there. I personally, however, do quite like this feature. The weights themselves are a little bit awkward to get in and out, so it isn't something you want to do on a regular basis, but it does of course provide that little bit of extra customization. So you can change the balance of the mouse, you can put the weights in the sort of position that feels best for you. I personally have put a single weight in the front of the mouse because for me it feels like it's slightly heavier in the rear, and then with that it does feel like it has a more overall balanced weight. But of course it is all down to personal preference. When it comes to the overall build quality of this mouse, I must say in general it is definitely pretty good. So the whole chassis is made of plastic, but it is a heavy mouse, and as such it does feel very solid and sturdy to hold. There is no real sort of flex to the body in general. There is a sort of slight rattle when you shake it, which I'm pretty sure is coming from the DPI buttons, but it doesn't really affect use of the mouse. Also, when it comes to the rubber side grips, they feel really solid and sort of hard wearing. They're set into the body of the mouse. They're obviously going to be more hard wearing than a plastic surface that might peel off or something, and I do think that the overall build quality is pretty good. The only real downside is the underside of the mouse. So that compartment that the weights go into, that sort of empty void that's covered by that piece of plastic, that piece of plastic is actually quite thin, so it's held in place with a magnet, so it holds in place really easily. But it does have quite a little flex to it, so if you squeeze the mouse from top to bottom, it does squish down quite a lot because that piece of plastic is quite thin. When it comes to using the mouse, I must say in general I was pretty impressed. The on-run switches that they've used for the left and the right click are quite lightweight and springy, but they still provide a nice satisfying click. This is quite a heavy mouse, but I had no problems with it gliding around my mouse mat, and it did feel very sort of comfortable and balanced to use while I was sort of gaming or browsing the web with it. I mentioned earlier on in the video that this mouse uses the Pixart 3389 sensor, and it is a really good sensor with an impressive range of specifications, and you're going to find it in a whole different range of gaming mice. The M5 isn't actually the cheapest of the bunch, but for me I do think it is probably the best value for money, as it has a range of features you're not going to find with the other mice at this price point. Also, the M5 does perform really well as well. So while I was gaming, I was using it. It is a gaming mouse, so of course I tested it out while I was gaming. It doesn't have any sort of acceleration or jittering issues, and I found it to be a really snappy and accurate sensor, so I couldn't blame missing a shot on my mouse while I was using the M5. When it comes to the DPI of this mouse, the sensor has a maximum DPI of 16,000 DPI if you really want to go that crazy and go that high and just make life that little bit harder. It can be adjusted in 50 DPI increments, and of course this mouse, like I said, does have 4 different profiles which you can program, so it does have some defaults but you can change them using the software. I personally liked using the mouse on the 1600 DPI option. When it comes to the lift-off distance of this mouse, by default it seemed to be around a couple of millimeters for me, but you can actually recalibrate it. So when you go into the Aorus engine software, it does have a recalibration option, which is a little bit awkward and clunky to use, but for me I do think it is worthwhile doing, as you can adjust the lift-off distance to basically be non-existent. So now I'm going to move on to talk about the Gigabyte Aorus engine software. So the mouse is a great piece of hardware, it's a great piece of kit. I really, as you can tell, the review's going quite well so far. However, the same unfortunately cannot be said for the piece of software. So a year ago I reviewed the M3 mouse, and it's something I brought up then that I didn't really like the Aorus engine software, and I must say not much has really improved since then either. That was a year ago, and I'm basically looking at nearly the same piece of software. So as you can see on my 4K display, it is really small and really quite fuzzy. I'm now going to do a screen recording so you can actually see what I'm doing. So taking a look on the first page of the mouse, you can see that this is the page that allows you to rebind all of the different buttons. So you can select a button and then you can change what it does, multimedia options, macro options, multi-hue options, etc. So plenty of different functionality. I'll put that back on default. So it is, I don't know if you can tell, it is slightly a bit clunky and awkward to use. It's something I don't like about this software. That's where you can record macros and things. For me, it's something, it works, but it's sort of like select them out. It doesn't feel intuitive to use. And also, of course, on my display, it's quite small as well. So going down here, you've got the other options. So you've got options to go onto the pointer page. So this is where you have options to adjust the DPI. And for me, those DPI numbers are really quite small and quite difficult to read. You then have a plus and minus, so you can change the DPI in 50 DPI increments, and you can also drag the slider as well. There is no option to type in what DPI you want. You can also change the polling rate, the report rate, so you grab the slider and it jumps along, and you've got also macro recording on that page as well. You can apply, and then also there is a button for calibration. So like I said, you can calibrate this mouse to whatever mouse mat you are using. It does take a bit of time to load, and then you can go enable it, and then you can set it down. For some reason it has actually forgotten, oh no, it has got my profile. So mat 1 is the mouse mat that I'm using. It's currently gone back up to high, so I need to drag it back down to low, hit apply. It was actually remembering that, but for some reason it has reset itself back. I'm not, maybe the software has updated, but yeah, you can calibrate your mouse mat. It does take a little bit to do, but you can actually do it. I'm trying to add new mats, and then this thing pops up, and then you click calibrate, and then you move the mouse around and you can add a new profile basically. So it does work, but it's a little bit clunky and you have to press quite a few buttons and things to get to it. The other button, I don't want to save, okay. Right, yes. The other button is the LED control button. So by clicking on that, this actually opens up a better piece of software. This is something that I think Gigabyte have actually worked on, because before the LED control was actually done within the app. So this is the RGB Fusion 2 software. So this is also what will work with motherboards and other peripherals and things to sync up the RGB software. So you can see it's detecting my Corsair memory, and it also has the mouse on there as well. So you can select between the different profiles. You can also select different parts of the mouse and change it individually, and then hit apply. So the Fusion software does actually work better. It's a bit quicker to use. All the text is actually of reasonable size. It is obviously a little bit larger on my display and things. You can add different profiles, and I would much prefer it if the mouse sort of functionality and RGB functionality was all in the same piece of software. So RGB Fusion software, they've obviously got it separate because it's RGB and They're trying to keep the sort of functionality and RGB things separate, but it would be nice to have it maybe all in this RGB Fusion software, because for me it does feel like a nicer piece of software. It's obviously something they've definitely been working on. But in general, for me, the software is definitely what sort of lets this mouse down, because I do think like a year on from when I did the M3 mouse review, I thought they maybe would have made a little bit more improvements to make it a little bit more intuitive and nicer to use. So overall, what do I think of the Aorus M5 mouse from Gigabyte? I must say that in general, I do really like this mouse. It has a good range of features, it has a high level of performance, and it also comes in at a really competitive price point that I think makes it really good value for money. Unfortunately, you do have to compromise on the software. I really don't think it's that great. It is definitely usable software, however, for me, it's really not as good as other competitors on the market. I think if you are someone that does like a heavier mouse, the M5 is definitely one worth considering. If you like this video from Kit Guru, please consider giving us a thumbs up. It really helps us out. Also, if you've never been here before, welcome to our channel. Please remember to hit that subscribe button and also press the bell icon so you get a notification every time a new video goes live. Also, other ways to support Kit Guru, we also have a Patreon account that gets you exclusive access to our Discord. You can also, of course, join our Discord and join in with conversations and things happening as well. And we do have our own merch store as well. I am rocking one of our t-shirts currently, and you can go over there and check it out. The link will be in the description below.